Stop. Just stop what you're doing and listen, because what I'm about to tell you will either change everything, or you'll dismiss it as the ramblings of an old prophet who's seen too much. This is not a coincidence that you're here, not at this hour, not in this moment when the veil between heaven and earth grows thin as tissue paper. Something is stirring in the spiritual realm tonight that most will never see, never feel, never understand. But you're different, aren't you? You've felt it building for weeks now. That restlessness in your spirit, that holy tension that makes you pace the floor at 2 a.m., wondering if God has forgotten your name. That gnawing sense that everything you thought you knew about divine power might be a carefully constructed lie. What if I told you that there are forces dark, ancient, relentless that have been working overtime to keep you from this very moment? What if every attack on your health, every betrayal that cut deep, every door that slammed shut in your face was orchestrated to stop you from discovering what I'm about to reveal? They tried to silence you through isolation. They whispered lies about your worth through depression. They attempted to steal your voice through circumstances that left you questioning everything you believed about God's plan for your life. But they failed. You're still here, still breathing, still believing, even when faith feels like holding on to smoke. See, what the enemy never understood is that every attack was actually preparing you. Every wound was training you. Every lonely night was positioning you for this exact moment when heaven would release a power so profound, so earth-shaking, that even the angels have been holding their breath. Tonight, something shifts. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight, the same God who spoke light into darkness, who raised the dead, who split seas and moved mountains, is about to move in your life with a force that will leave no room for doubt about who you really are. Before we go deeper, I want to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just giving, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling, who are crying in the dark, wondering if God still sees them. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, if something deep inside is stirring right now, don't ignore it. Because what happened next, what I witnessed in the spirit realm just hours before recording this message, made the very foundations of darkness tremble. Are you ready to see why they tried so hard to keep you from this moment? You feel it, don't you? That stillness, that strange, almost electric quiet that settled over your life like a velvet curtain. You've been walking through your days wondering if God went silent, if heaven turned its back, if somehow the divine frequency got lost in the static of your pain. But listen closely. Chosen one. Listen with more than your ears. This is not silence. This is heaven inhaling before it roars your breakthrough. What you're experiencing right now, this holy hush, this sacred pause, it's not abandonment, it's anticipation. The entire spiritual realm has pressed its face against the glass of eternity, watching your story unfold like a masterpiece being painted in real time. You thought the quiet meant you were forgotten, but heaven doesn't forget its warriors. Heaven holds its breath when a divine reversal is about to shatter every lie the enemy ever whispered about your future. Think about it. When a master conductor raises his baton, what happens first? Silence. Perfect, pregnant, powerful silence. Every musician leans forward. Every note waits. Every instrument trembles with potential. The audience holds its breath because they know something magnificent is about to explode into existence. That's where you are right now. In the silence before the symphony, you're not being ignored. You're being orchestrated. The tears you've cried in the darkness, each one was collected in heaven's bottles, cataloged, numbered, and stored as evidence in the cosmic courtroom where your vindication is being prepared. The prayers you whispered when your voice was too broken to speak out loud, they've been echoing through the throne room, bouncing off golden walls, gathering momentum like thunder rolling across infinite skies. But here's what the enemy never calculated. Here's what hell never saw coming. Your silence became your strength. Your stillness became your strategy. While they were expecting you to scream, to rage, to demand answers from a God who seemed absent, you did something that made demons tremble and angels weep with admiration. You waited. You trusted. You held on. Not because you understood the plan, not because the path made sense, but because somewhere deep in the marrow of your faith, you knew that this God who called you by name before the foundation of the world wasn't finished writing your story. And now, tonight, heaven is about to prove you right. You didn't fall. You endured. You didn't break. You bent. You didn't quit. You quieted. See, there's a difference between being silenced and choosing silence. The world tried to silence you through circumstances, through betrayal, through loss that cut so deep you wondered if you'd ever feel whole again. But you chose a different kind of silence. You chose the silence of surrender, the silence of trust, the silence of a warrior who knows that sometimes the most powerful weapon is stillness. That choice, that holy, humble, earth-shaking choice has been reverberating through dimensions you can't see. It's been building pressure in places where pressure creates miracles. It's been shifting the spiritual atmosphere around your life, like tectonic plates preparing for an earthquake. The enemy miscalculated everything about you. He thought if he could steal your voice, he could steal your victory. He thought if he could make you question your calling, he could cancel your commission. He thought if he could bury you in disappointment, he could write your obituary. But he forgot one crucial detail. You're not just anybody. You're chosen. And chosen ones don't just survive, they resurrect. They don't just endure, they emerge. They don't just outlast the storm, they come out carrying lightning in their hands and thunder in their voice. Tonight, that emergence begins. The stillness you've been feeling, it's not the absence of divine activity, it's the presence of divine preparation. Heaven has been moving chess pieces across the board of your destiny while you slept. Angels have been dispatched to clear pathways you haven't even imagined yet. Doors that were welded shut by human hands are being blown off their hinges by divine breath. You're not forgotten, you're about to be revealed. What looked like delay was actually divine timing. What felt like denial was actually divine alignment. What seemed like darkness was actually the backstage of heaven, where your breakthrough was being dressed in glory, rehearsed in power, and prepared for an entrance that will leave no room for doubt about whose you are. The very air around you is thick with anticipation. Can you feel it? That weightiness, that holy tension, that sense that something bigger than your circumstances is pressing in from every direction? That's not your imagination. That's heaven holding its breath. Because tonight, this hour, this very moment, the silence breaks. The curtain rises, the symphony begins, and you, chosen one, are about to remember why they tried so hard to make you forget who you really are. The quiet is over. Your roar begins now. They thought fear would break you. It backfired. You see, chosen one, what the kingdom of darkness never calculated was this. When you attack someone who was born for battle, you don't destroy them. You awaken them. And every blow they threw at you, every scheme they whispered in boardrooms of hell, every betrayal they orchestrated through people you trusted, all of it was meant to end you before you even knew who you were. But here's what happened instead. Here's what made the demons tremble in their councils of war. You didn't break, you bent. You didn't shatter. You scattered their plans like dust in a hurricane. You didn't fall silent. You found your voice in the valley of dry bones. The meeting they called because of you. Let me tell you something that will make your spirit leap. Hell had an emergency meeting the moment you drew your first breath. Not because of what you had done, you were just a baby, but because of what you would become. The enemy saw your spiritual blueprint before you could even spell your own name. They saw the generational curses you would break. They saw the strongholds you would tear down with nothing but praise on your lips. They saw the revival fire that would flow through your bloodline for generations to come. And they panicked. So they assigned their best, their most cunning, their most relentless operatives to your case. They deployed depression like a fog to cloud your vision. They sent betrayal disguised as friendship to wound your trust. They orchestrated delay after delay to make you question God's timing. But what hell didn't know, what they couldn't see, is that heaven had a plan the moment you said yes. You were never fighting alone. Every time you stood up after being knocked down, angels took notes. Every time you worshiped through tears, heaven's armies moved into position. Every time you chose forgiveness over bitterness, you weren't just healing your heart, you were tearing holes in the enemy's strategy. You thought you were barely surviving. God knew you were systematically dismantling. The war wasn't random, beloved. The attacks weren't coincidental. You weren't unlucky. You were marked by heaven as dangerous to darkness. Marked as the one who would flip the script on everything the enemy thought he had locked down in your family line. That depression that tried to drown you, it was afraid of the joy you would carry. That poverty that stalked your doorstep, it was terrified of the abundance flowing through your hands. Those relationships that crumbled without explanation, they couldn't handle the purity of purpose burning in your bones. The battlefield you didn't choose, but now you command. They dragged you into warfare before you even knew how to pray. They hit you with weapons you couldn't see, wounds you couldn't explain, battles that left no visible scars but carved canyons in your soul. But here's the divine reversal. What was meant to be your grave became your training ground. Every sleepless night taught you how to commune with God in the darkness. Every betrayal showed you how to discern spirits with surgical precision. Every closed door forced you to learn that when God opens, no man can shut. You didn't fight fire with fire. You transcended the battlefield entirely. While they were throwing punches, you were learning how to speak life into dead situations. While they were spreading lies, you were discovering that truth doesn't need defense, it needs declaration. While they were plotting your destruction, you were being rebuilt with materials they couldn't touch. Faith that endures, hope that anchors, love that conquers. The tide has turned, and no woe. Now the very demons that once hunted you are running from your presence, not because you've become harsh, because you've become holy, not because you're angry, because you're anointed. They used to whisper your name in their war rooms with anticipation. Now they speak it with dread, because somewhere in the midst of all their attacks, you stopped trying to defend yourself and started declaring who God says you are. Somewhere between the betrayal and the breakthrough, you stopped asking, "Why me?" and started proclaiming, "Try me." The war that started because of what you carry will end because of what you've become. Your name is now a weapon. Every time you speak truth, strongholds shake. Every time you worship, chains snap. Every time you simply show up in a room, the atmosphere shifts because you're not the same person who entered this battlefield years ago. You've been forged in fires that would have consumed others. You've been pressed in places that would have crushed the average believer. You've been stretched beyond what seems reasonable or fair. But that wasn't punishment. That was preparation. Because the God who allowed the pressure knew exactly what kind of weapon you would become when the heat was over. He knew that what emerged from your wilderness would carry enough spiritual authority to shift generations. You didn't just survive the war, chosen one. You won it the moment you refused to let it change your heart. The victory you didn't see coming. And now, as you stand on the other side of battles that should have destroyed you, carrying scars that have become sacred, wearing wounds that have become wisdom, you are exactly what hell feared you would become. You are the answer to your ancestors' prayers. You are the breakthrough your bloodline has been crying out for. You are the weapon heaven forged in the furnace of your faithfulness. The war you didn't start is about to end, and it will end with you standing victorious, not because you were stronger, but because you were surrendered, not because you fought harder, but because you trusted deeper. Hell had a meeting because of you. Heaven had a plan because of you. And today, that plan moves into its final phase. The war is not just over, beloved. You have already won. The calendar says midnight, but the courtroom of heaven says, it's done. You feel it, don't you? That strange electricity in the air tonight. That holy tension that makes your spirit restless while your body sits still. Something is shifting in dimensions you can't see with your natural eyes, but your soul knows. Your soul has been preparing for this moment longer than your mind can remember. This is not just another midnight hour where the lonely cry and the weary wrestle with sleep. This is the hour when spiritual tides reverse before morning breaks. This is when heaven's verdicts are issued while earth still thinks the trial is ongoing. They thought the delay meant denial. They miscalculated. You've been watching the clock, haven't you? Counting months, years, even decades of what looked like divine silence. Wondering if your prayers got lost in transit between your lips and God's ears. The enemy whispered that time was running out, that your season had passed, that younger voices and fresher faces had taken your place in heaven's plans. But what hell never understood about divine timing is this: God doesn't work on Earth's schedule. He works on eternity's calendar. And on that calendar, your breakthrough was never late. It was precisely positioned for maximum impact. While you were counting days, God was counting heartbeats. While you were marking calendars, He was marking moments. While you were watching clocks, He was watching character. And tonight, the spiritual clock strikes your hour. The earth doesn't know it yet. Your circumstances haven't gotten the memo. Your bank account didn't receive the notification. Your doctor hasn't seen the lab results. Your relationships haven't felt the shift. But heaven has already ruled. The verdict is in. The sentence is reversed. The appeal has been granted. In the spirit realm, midnight is not an ending, it's a beginning. There's something mystical about this hour that the ancient saints understood. While the world sleeps, heaven works. While the masses slumber, the remnant rises. While ordinary believers dream, the chosen ones receive downloads from dimensions that don't sleep, don't rest, don't ever stop orchestrating your victory. You're not awake by accident right now. This restlessness isn't insomnia, it's intercession. Your spirit is responding to movement in realms where angels work the night shift, where principalities tremble, where the books of heaven are being rewritten in your favor. The midnight flip isn't about waiting for morning. It's about recognizing that in God's economy, the greatest victories happen when the natural world thinks nothing is happening. David became king in caves. Joseph ruled from prison cells. Moses met God on mountains while Israel camped in valleys. Your season of invisible preparation is becoming visible demonstration. They told you to be patient. They said your time would come. They promised that if you just waited long enough, worked hard enough, prayed deep enough, eventually you might see breakthrough. But they were thinking too small. They were operating from Earth's limitations, not heaven's possibilities. God doesn't just give you breakthrough. He gives you breakthrough with compound interest. He doesn't just restore what was lost. He multiplies what was faithful. He doesn't just heal what was broken. He makes it stronger than it ever was before. Tonight, while the world sleeps, heaven is issuing retroactive blessings, backdated favor, pre-approved miracles, the kind of divine intervention that doesn't just change your tomorrow, it redeems your yesterday. The flip has already happened. Now you move like it has. This is where faith becomes dangerous to darkness. Not when you believe God can do something, but when you move like He already has. not when you hope for change, but when you walk like change has already found you. Don't wait for the scene to change. Move like it already has. Stop asking permission from circumstances that don't have the authority to grant it. Stop seeking approval from systems that were never designed to recognize your anointing. Stop waiting for external confirmation of internal revelation. You are not the same person who went to sleep last night. Something shifted while you weren't looking. Something moved while you were resting. Something turned while you were trusting. And though the morning hasn't come yet, though the sun hasn't risen, though the evidence hasn't appeared, the ruling has been handed down. Your name was called in heaven's courtroom tonight, not as the accused, but as the vindicated, not as the defendant, but as the favored, not as the one on trial, but as the one heaven defends. When heaven rules, earth must comply. It's not a request, it's a command. The elements that fought against you must now work for you. The people who dismissed you must now witness your elevation. The doors that stayed closed must now swing wide. The resources that seemed scarce must now flow like rivers, not because you demanded it, but because heaven decreed it. And decrees from the throne of God don't come with expiration dates. They don't need human approval. They don't require earthly cooperation. They simply are. So breathe differently now. Walk differently now. Speak differently now. Not with arrogance, but with assurance. Not with pride, but with peace. Not with boasting, but with knowing. The midnight flip has happened. The spiritual tide has turned. The heavenly verdict is in. What happens next isn't about waiting. It's about walking. Walking like someone who knows that though the earth doesn't know it yet, heaven already does. And that's more than enough. They thought confusion would be your coffin. Instead, it became your cocoon. Chosen one, you've been walking through life with spiritual amnesia, haven't you? Like someone who survived a car crash but can't remember their own name. You knew something was missing, something profound, something that made you different from everyone around you who seemed so settled, so satisfied with ordinary. But you were never ordinary. Tonight, the fog lifts. Tonight, the veil that's been draped over your true identity doesn't just thin, it tears. And what's underneath will take your breath away. You see, the enemy's greatest weapon wasn't your pain. It wasn't your past. It wasn't even your failures. His greatest weapon was making you forget who you've always been. Because a chosen one who doesn't know they're chosen is just a confused person carrying unexplained power, a prophet without a voice, a king without a crown. But amnesia isn't permanent, and tonight, your memory returns. You were never the problem. Look back now with clearer eyes. Every time you felt too much for other people, every time your sensitivity was called weakness, every time your depth was labeled as drama, you thought something was wrong with you. You were wrong about being wrong. You weren't broken. You were different. You weren't unstable. You were anointed. You weren't crazy. You were called. And the very things that made you feel like a misfit were actually the fingerprints of destiny marking your soul. That restlessness you've carried since childhood, that wasn't anxiety. That was your spirit, recognizing it was made for more than this world could offer. That inability to stomach fake relationships, that wasn't antisocial behavior. That was divine discernment protecting your assignment from counterfeit connections. That fire in your bones that wouldn't let you settle, wouldn't let you compromise, wouldn't let you play small even when it cost you friendships. That wasn't rebellion. That was revelation. Your spirit knew what your mind had forgotten. You carry royal blood in your veins. Not metaphorically, literally. You are a child of the King of Kings, and royalty doesn't bow to peasant thinking. The mirror cracks. The truth emerges. For years, You've been looking at yourself through a cracked mirror. The reflection was distorted. Trauma told you who you were. Rejection rewrote your story. Pain painted your portrait, and none of it was true. But tonight, the real mirror appears. And in it, you see not who you became through suffering, but who you were before the world tried to rename you. You see someone who was handpicked by heaven before time began. Someone whose name was spoken in the throne room of eternity before your first breath. Someone who carries light so bright that darkness had to launch a campaign of confusion just to keep you from remembering how powerful you really are. The enemy didn't fear your pain. He feared the day you'd remember your name. And that day is today. The fire that never died. You thought it was gone, didn't you? That spark, that sense of purpose, that knowing that you were meant for something significant. Life beat it down. Disappointment buried it. Betrayal tried to drown it. But fire doesn't die, it just waits. Tonight, your spirit catches up with your prophecy. What was always true about you is finally becoming clear to you. The fire wasn't extinguished. It was protected. Hidden beneath layers of survival, shielded by scars, preserved in the secret place of your soul where nothing could touch it. You feel it now, don't you? That warmth spreading through your chest, that stirring in your bones. That's not emotion, that's recognition. Your spirit recognizing itself after years of disguise. You didn't lose your calling in the chaos. Your calling was being refined in the chaos. Every trial was adding fuel to flames that were always meant to burn bright enough to light up generations. The awakening accelerates. This isn't a gradual process anymore. This is a spiritual avalanche. Once remembrance begins, it doesn't stop. It multiplies. It compounds. It cascades through every area of your life until nothing looks the same. You're going to start moving differently, speaking differently, choosing differently. Not because you're trying to change, but because you're remembering. And when you remember who you are, acting beneath that identity becomes impossible. People will notice. They'll ask what happened to you. What changed? What's different? And you'll smile, that quiet smile of someone who just found out they've been a millionaire all along but was living like a pauper because they forgot to check their account. You'll tell them, I just remembered who I am, the name that shakes foundations. There's a name written in heaven's books, a name that makes demons tremble and angels rejoice, a name that carries weight in the spirit realm. A name that opens doors and breaks chains and shifts atmospheres just by being spoken. That name is yours. Not the name trauma gave you, not the name rejection tried to make stick, not the name carved by critics or whispered by doubters. Your real name, your heaven-given, spirit-sealed, eternally significant name. And when you start answering to that name instead of all the false identities you've been carrying, watch what happens. Watch how your presence changes. Watch how your voice carries new authority. Watch how your steps make the ground of impossibility crack beneath your feet. You're not who they said you were. You're who He says you are. And what He says is final. The veil is gone. Look around you now. Do you see it? The shimmer in the air? The sense that something has shifted? That's not your imagination. That's the spiritual atmosphere responding to your remembrance. When a chosen one remembers who they are, creation itself takes notice. The veil between the natural and supernatural doesn't just thin, it disappears. You don't just believe in miracles anymore. You expect them. You don't just hope for breakthrough. You carry it. You are no longer a person who has faith. You are faith walking in human form. You are no longer someone who seeks God's presence. You are someone in whom His presence has made its home. The amnesia is over. The confusion has cleared. The false identity has been burned away. What remains is who you've always been. Chosen, called, crowned, commissioned, and utterly, completely, magnificently unstoppable. Welcome back to yourself, chosen one. Heaven has been waiting for this moment. The real you has finally come home. They thought hesitation would paralyze you. Heaven had other plans. Chosen one, we've reached the moment where feelings must bow to faith, where comfort must surrender to calling, where the whispers of maybe tomorrow must be silenced by the roar of yes, Lord, now. You've felt it building, haven't you? That holy pressure in your chest, that divine restlessness that won't let you sleep, that spiritual urgency that makes your very bones ache with purpose. This isn't anxiety, beloved. This is heaven's alarm clock going off in your spirit. For too long, you've been standing at the edge of breakthrough, asking God for more signs when He's already painted the sky with confirmation. You've been waiting for perfect conditions when perfection was never the requirement. You've been delaying your yes while heaven holds its breath, waiting for your surrender. But tonight, the waiting ends. Listen carefully. God is not waiting for your understanding. He's waiting for your yes. He's not looking for your strategy. He's looking for your submission. He's not demanding your perfection. He's requiring your participation. You see, the enemy has been playing a masterful game of delay. He couldn't kill your calling, so he's been trying to postpone it. He couldn't steal your anointing, so he's been attempting to stall it. He whispers lies about timing. Wait until you're ready. Wait until it makes sense. Wait until others approve. But delayed obedience is still disobedience. Every day you hesitate is another day the enemy celebrates. Every moment you second-guess what God has already confirmed is another victory for darkness. Every time you choose comfort over calling, you're handing the devil ammunition against your destiny. You think you're being careful. Heaven sees it as rebellion wrapped in religious clothing. The battlefield was never about your qualifications. It was about your compliance. Right now, there are doors with your name on them, trembling on their hinges, waiting for your obedience to swing them wide. There are people whose freedom is tied to your yes. There are generational curses that will shatter the moment you stop asking what if and start declaring even if. Your obedience is not just about you, chosen one. It's about everyone connected to your calling. It's about the children who will inherit blessing instead of bondage because you chose breakthrough over comfort. It's about the strangers who will encounter God through your surrender when you finally step into your assignment. Obedience opens doors talent could never reach. You've seen others with less gifting walk through opportunities you've been praying for. You've watched people with half your anointing receive double your influence. And you've wondered why. Here's why. They said yes faster. They moved when heaven whispered instead of waiting for heaven to shout. God doesn't promote the most talented. He elevates the most obedient. He doesn't choose the most qualified. He selects the most yielded. Your resume doesn't impress heaven. Your willingness does. That stirring in your spirit right now, that's not emotion. That's instruction. That uncomfortable tension you feel, that's not confusion. That's conviction. Heaven is speaking, but it's not speaking to your mind. It's speaking to your spirit. And your spirit knows exactly what it's being told to do. Stop negotiating with God and start moving with Him. You've been asking for clarity when you already have it. You've been praying for direction when the path is lit up like Times Square at midnight. You've been seeking confirmation when your spirit is shouting "go" so loud that demons are covering their ears. The enemy wants you to think obedience is complicated. It's not. It's costly, but it's not complicated. It requires courage, but it doesn't require a PhD in theology. It demands surrender, but it doesn't demand perfection. Your weapon was never your wisdom. It was your willingness. Every spiritual victory in your life came through obedience, not understanding. Every breakthrough happened when you said yes before you had all the details. Every miracle manifested when you moved in faith instead of waiting for sight. Abraham left his country without a GPS. Moses confronted Pharaoh with a stutter. David faced Goliath with a slingshot. Mary said yes to carrying the Messiah before she understood the implications. None of them had perfect clarity. They all had perfect obedience. And that's all heaven requires from you tonight. The command echoing in your spirit isn't new. You've heard it before, but you've been treating it like a suggestion instead of a summons. You've been handling it like an option instead of an order. But God doesn't make requests to the chosen. He issues assignments. That thing you've been putting off, that conversation you've been avoiding, that step you've been postponing, that sacrifice you've been delaying, stop. The time is now, not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready. Now. Delayed obedience has cost you more than disobedience ever could. How many blessings have passed you by while you waited for courage? How many opportunities have expired while you waited for understanding? How many people have remained in bondage while you waited for convenience? Your hesitation isn't humility, it's rebellion. Your delay isn't wisdom, it's warfare. Your procrastination isn't patience, it's partnership with the enemy's agenda. But tonight, that partnership ends. Heaven is releasing a spirit of holy urgency over your life. The same fire that drove the prophets is awakening in your bones. The same passion that moved the apostles is stirring in your spirit. The same obedience that characterized Christ is calling out from within you. You will move when God says move. You will speak when God says speak. You will go when God says go, not because you feel like it, not because it makes sense, not because others approve, but because the King has spoken and His word is law in your life. Your obedience tonight determines your authority tomorrow. Every time you choose God's will over your comfort, you gain rank in the Spirit. Every time you surrender your agenda for His assignment, you receive new weapons for warfare. Every time you say yes when your flesh wants to say no, you unlock dimensions of power you didn't know existed. The chosen don't just carry calling, they carry the courage to act on it. They don't just hear heaven's voice, they heed it. They don't just receive revelation, they respond to it. And that's exactly who you're about to become. The sound you hear in your spirit right now isn't thunder. It's the sound of doors opening. It's the echo of chains breaking. It's the whisper of breakthrough accelerating toward your obedience. God is not waiting for your understanding. He's waiting for your yes. They thought fear would break you. It backfired. Every chain they wrapped around your ankles became fuel for the fire they didn't know was already burning in your bones. Every curse word they whispered over your bloodline became kindling for a blaze that would consume everything they built to hold you down. You see, chosen one, there's something the enemy never understood about you. You weren't born to maintain their broken systems. You weren't sent here to keep their poisonous traditions alive. You didn't arrive on this earth to blend into their carefully constructed chaos. You came here to break things, not because you're rebellious, not because you're difficult, but because heaven looked at your family line and said, "Enough. Send the one who carries fire. Send the one who won't bow. Send the breaker." And that's you. You've always felt it, haven't you? That restlessness when people tried to stuff you into boxes that were never built for your spirit. That holy agitation when you walked into rooms where compromise was dressed up as wisdom. That righteous anger that rose up in your chest when you watched good people shrink to make evil comfortable. They called you too much, too intense, too deep, too sensitive. But heaven called you perfectly calibrated. Every generational curse that slithered through your bloodline for decades, addiction, depression, poverty mindset, spiritual blindness, emotional numbness, every single one of them reached your doorstep and met something they'd never encountered before. Breaker oil. You didn't fight fire with fire. You became the fire. You didn't just survive the trauma that destroyed others in your family. You transcended the entire battlefield. You looked at patterns that had been running for generations and said, "Not on my watch, not through my children, not in my name." And something shifted in the spiritual realm. The same DNA that carried weakness in others began carrying strength in you. The same bloodline that whispered you can't started shouting, "Watch me," through your veins. The same genetic code that spelled defeat for your ancestors became the very signature of your victory. You are not the end result of trauma, chosen one. You are heaven's rebellion against it. Listen to me. Every midnight hour you spent on your knees when your own family was too broken to pray. Every time you chose forgiveness when bitterness would have been easier. Every moment you decided to heal instead of repeat, those weren't just personal victories. Those were generational earthquakes. You've been breaking invisible chains that your great-grandchildren will never even know existed. You've been dismantling altars of dysfunction that have been poisoning your family tree for decades. You've been the one-person wrecking crew that hell never saw coming. They thought they could break you through isolation. They tried to bury you under the weight of everyone else's unhealed pain. They whispered that you were cursed, forgotten, abandoned by the very God you kept calling on. But what they didn't know is that every attack was only adding more fuel to the fire that was already sealed in your bones before you took your first breath. You didn't inherit their weakness. You inherited their warfare. And you've been winning it one prayer at a time, one choice at a time, one breath at a time. You've stood in rooms full of your own blood relatives and felt like a stranger because your spirit was speaking a language they'd forgotten how to understand. You've watched people you love choose the same destructive patterns over and over while something inside you screamed, "There has to be another way." And there was. You were the other way. You were the plot twist hell never wrote into their script. You were the surprise ending that turned their tragedy into heaven's triumph. You were the one they never expected to survive, let alone thrive, let alone carry fire that would burn down everything they built in darkness. Your very existence is prophetic warfare. When you walk into a room where depression has been comfortable for years, it gets nervous. When you speak life in environments where death has been the only conversation, things start to shift. When you choose joy in places where sorrow was a family tradition, the atmosphere itself begins to tremble. You're not just different from your family, chosen one. You're the answer to their prayers they were too broken to pray. You carry breaker oil, not maintenance oil, not survival oil. Breaker oil, the kind that doesn't just fix what's broken, it shatters what was never supposed to be built in the first place. The kind that doesn't just heal wounds, it demolishes the weapons that caused them. The kind that doesn't just break chains, it melts down the entire foundry where they were forged. You didn't survive the fire, you became it. And now every step you take leaves footprints of flame. Every word you speak carries the heat of heaven's justice. Every choice you make burns a path for others to follow out of the wilderness that tried to claim your entire bloodline. They thought they were dealing with another victim. They woke up a destroyer. Not a destroyer of people, a destroyer of systems, a destroyer of lies, a destroyer of every demonic structure that thought it could build a throne on the backs of your ancestors. You are the breaker, the one who says it ends here, the one who carries fire that doesn't just warm it, transforms. It doesn't just light it, illuminates everything that was hiding in the shadows, trembling, hoping you'd never discover who you really are. But you have discovered it, haven't you? You're not just healed, you're the healer. You're not just delivered, you're the deliverer. You're not just set free, you're the key that unlocks cages you'll never even see. The fire in your bones isn't just burning for you, chosen one. It's burning for everyone who comes after you. You've been the bearer of everyone else's storms, haven't you? The one they call when their world crumbles. The shoulder that never says no. The heart that absorbs their pain like a sponge soaking up spilled wine. You've carried your mother's depression, your father's rage, your children's failures, your spouse's doubts. You've carried the weight of churches that forgot how to love, communities that forgot how to heal, and a generation that forgot how to hope. And somewhere in all that carrying, you forgot something sacred. You forgot that vessels need filling too. Tonight, God is calling for a divine exchange. Not the kind where you trade one burden for another. The kind where heaven reaches down and says, "Enough. This one has carried enough. This one has poured out enough. This one, This one gets poured into. They thought emptying you would silence you. Heaven had other plans. See, what the enemy miscalculated was the alchemy of divine purpose. He thought if he could drain you dry, you'd have nothing left to give. But what he didn't understand is that empty vessels make the most room for glory. Empty wells make space for living water. Empty hearts make room for the kind of oil that doesn't just fill, it overflows. You didn't become weak from all that carrying. You became consecrated. Every tear you absorbed from others became a prayer in heaven's vault. Every burden you shouldered became strength you didn't know you possessed. Every time you said yes when your soul screamed no, you were making deposits in an account you couldn't see, but heaven was recording. The weight wasn't punishment. It was proof you were carrying oil. Oil that refuses to run dry. Oil that multiplies under pressure. Oil that becomes more precious the longer it's refined. You've been walking around thinking you're depleted, but heaven sees something different. Heaven sees a vessel so saturated with sacred oil that even your emptiness carries more weight than most people's fullness. But tonight, the exchange begins. What you gave in secret, God restores in abundance. There's a divine mathematics at work that the natural mind can't calculate. You poured out compassion when you had none to spare. Heaven multiplies it back. You gave love when you felt unloved. The Father's love rushes toward you like a river breaking through a dam. You carried others when you could barely stand. Strength comes to find you that doesn't depend on caffeine or willpower or positive thinking. This is supernatural restoration. Not the kind where you get back what was taken. The kind where you receive more than what was lost. Not replacement multiplication. Not repair renovation. Not healing resurrection. You thought you were just surviving all those years of giving. But heaven was watching a masterpiece being painted. Every act of selfless love was another brushstroke. Every sacrifice was another shade of glory. Every moment you chose others over yourself was another layer of divine beauty being crafted in your spirit. You're not weak, you're just overdue for revival. The drought was positioning you for the downpour. See, God doesn't just pour into any vessel. He pours into the ones that have proven they won't hoard what they receive. He fills the hands that have a history of giving. He refuels the hearts that have burned bright even when the oil ran low. You've passed the test of emptiness. You've proven you'll love when the tank reads empty. You'll serve when the reserves are gone. You'll stand when the strength has fled. And that kind of faithfulness, that rare, precious, costly faithfulness that gets heaven's attention. Tonight, while others sleep in their comfort, while others guard their energy, while others count their coins and ration their compassion, you get filled. Not because you demanded it, not because you earned it, because you emptied yourself for the sake of love. And love never forgets its own. The divine exchange is simple. Your burden for His breakthrough, your weariness for His strength, your depletion for His overflow, your carrying for His covering. This moment is about you, not selfishness, sacredness. For once, just once, you don't have to be the strong one. You don't have to have the answers. You don't have to carry the load. You don't have to be the rock everyone leans on. Tonight, you get to lean. Tonight, you get to rest. Tonight, you get to receive. God is saying, child, you've been my hands to the broken, now let me be hands to you. You've been my voice to the voiceless. Now let me speak life over your silence. You've been my heart to the heartbroken. Now let me heal the places in you that learned to break so others could mend. This isn't selfish. This is sacred. This is the God who commands the ocean to be still, turning His attention to the storm in your soul and speaking the same word, peace. The vessel that's been pouring out for decades is about to be poured into with the kind of oil that doesn't just fill, it transforms, doesn't just satisfy, it overflows, doesn't just restore, it resurrects. You carried them until you couldn't carry yourself. Now heaven carries you. There's a tenderness in this exchange that only the weary understand. Only the depleted can recognize. Only the ones who've given until it hurt, loved until it cost, served until it scaredly they know what it means when heaven whispers, your turn to be held, your turn to be healed, your turn to be filled until you overflow not from obligation but from abundance. Your turn to discover that the God you served so faithfully in your emptiness becomes even more faithful in your filling. The divine exchange is complete. What you released in love returns as glory. What you sacrificed in service resurrects as strength. What you gave in secret is now being restored in the sight of all who doubted your worth. You're not the same person who entered this chapter carrying everyone else's pain. You're the person who exits carrying heaven's oil. And that oil, that precious, sacred, multiplying oil, it doesn't just fill you, it flows through you to fill a generation that's been waiting for someone brave enough to carry both burden and breakthrough. The exchange is finished. The vessel is full. The overflow begins now. The silence is breaking. You feel it, don't you? That shift in the air around you. That change in pressure that makes your spirit stand at attention even when your body wants to rest. Something invisible has moved. Something eternal has shifted. And what was once still is now in motion. You've been fighting this battle for so long that you forgot you weren't fighting alone. You've been carrying this weight for so many years that you assumed it was yours to bear forever. You've been walking through this wilderness believing that your footsteps were the only sound heaven could hear. But you were wrong. While you were praying in whispers, heaven was mobilizing armies. While you were weeping in secret, angels were receiving their orders. While you thought you were forgotten, your name was being called in the courts of glory with such authority that even the seraphim took notice. They thought fear would break you. It backfired. Every sleepless night you endured wasn't just insomnia, it was intercession. Every tear that hit your pillow wasn't just sorrow, it was worship. Every moment you felt abandoned wasn't abandonment at all, it was preparation for this exact moment when heaven would reveal what it's been doing behind the veil. You see, there's something the enemy never understood about chosen ones like you. The more pressure he applies, the more you shine. The deeper he digs the pit, the higher God builds your platform. The louder hell screams, the clearer heaven's voice becomes. And now that voice has spoken your name with such power that the atmosphere around your life is cracking open like an egg. Angels are on assignment tonight. Not the greeting card kind with harps and halos. These are warriors. These are the same beings who shut the mouths of lions, who rolled away stones, who struck down armies with a word. And they've been given one mission: clear the path for what's about to unfold in your life. You've been surrounded in silence, but now you'll be escorted in power. There are rooms with your name on them that have been locked for decades. Tonight, those locks are being broken. There are doors that have been sealed against you by fear, by doubt, by the whispers of those who said you'd never amount to anything. Tonight, those seals are being shattered by hands you cannot see, but power you will surely feel. The very air around you is being cleansed. Every toxic word spoken over your life is being pulled out of the atmosphere like poison from a wound. Every curse that tried to attach itself to your bloodline is being severed by swords of light. Every limitation that was placed on your future is being removed with the precision of divine surgery. This is not imagination. This is divine intervention in motion. You know how you've been feeling different lately? How certain places don't feel the same? How some people seem uncomfortable around you for no reason you can name? That's because you're carrying something new, something ancient, something that makes demons nervous and angels smile. The atmosphere around you is breaking because what you've been through has broken something in the spirit realm. Your persistence shattered hell's confidence. Your faithfulness fractured fear's foundation. Your refusal to quit cracked open a dimension of divine backing that most people never experience. Listen carefully. You didn't survive those attacks by accident. You were preserved by assignment. You weren't kept alive to barely make it. You were kept alive to make it count. And what's about to count in your life will echo through eternity. Right now, as you're reading these words, there are angelic beings positioning themselves at every entrance to your future. They're not asking permission. They're not requesting access. They're taking their positions because the King of Heaven issued the order, and when he speaks, creation responds. The meeting rooms where your name will be spoken with respect, angels are there, preparing the hearts of those who will hear you. The opportunities that have been hidden from your view, angels are there, removing the obstacles that kept them out of sight. The relationships that will pour life into your spirit, angels are there, orchestrating encounters that will look like coincidence but feel like destiny. You've prayed for breakthrough. What you're about to experience is breakthrough, breakdown, and break open, all at the same time. Breakthrough for you, breakdown for everything that stood against you, and break open for a dimension of favor you didn't even know existed. The enemy thought if he could isolate you long enough, you'd forget who you are. He thought if he could exhaust you thoroughly enough, you'd abandon your calling. He thought if he could confuse you completely enough, you'd walk away from your assignment. He was wrong on every count. Instead of breaking you, the isolation refined you. Instead of weakening you, the exhaustion strengthened your dependence on divine grace. Instead of defeating you, the confusion clarified what really matters. And now heaven is responding to what you've become in the fire. The atmosphere is breaking because you've reached a tipping point. Not the kind where you fall, but the kind where everything else falls into place. The spiritual realm has been watching, waiting, measuring the weight of your faithfulness against the fury of hell's resistance. And you tip the scales. Now watch what happens when heaven moves on behalf of someone who refused to move away from their calling. Watch what unfolds when angels receive clearance to act on behalf of someone who never gave up on God's promises. Watch what breaks open when divine intervention meets human perseverance. You thought you were walking alone. You were being escorted the entire time. You thought you were fighting for survival. You were actually fighting for supremacy. You thought you were barely hanging on. You were actually holding the line until reinforcements arrived. Well, chosen one, they're here. The atmosphere around your life is breaking. The old is passing away. The new is breaking through. And angels are on assignment to make sure nothing and no one can stop what God has decided to release. You've been surrounded in silence, but now you'll be escorted in power. This is not imagination. This is divine intervention in motion, and it's just the beginning. They thought the warfare would weaken you. Instead, it weaponized you. Every attack you endured, every sleepless night, every moment you felt forgotten, it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And tonight, heaven is revealing why every demon in hell targeted your peace, your sanity, your very breath. Because they saw what you couldn't see yet. They recognized the weight you were born to carry before you even knew you had shoulders strong enough to bear it. You've been fighting a war most people don't even know exists. While others lived in comfort, you walked through spiritual combat zones. While they slept peacefully, you wrestled with principalities in the dark, and you wondered why. Why me? Why this heavy? Why this hard? Here's why. Because God doesn't give lightweight assignments to heavyweight warriors. And you, chosen one, have been carrying the kind of spiritual authority that makes hell nervous. The courtroom of heaven has rendered its verdict. There's a trial that's been happening in the unseen realm. Not against you, for you. Every tear you cried became evidence. Every prayer you whispered through gritted teeth became testimony. Every time you chose obedience when your flesh screamed rebellion, heaven took notes. The prosecution tried to build a case against your worthiness. They presented your failures, your moments of doubt, your broken places as disqualifying evidence. But the judge saw something different. He saw a heart that refused to quit, a spirit that wouldn't break, a faith that bent but never snapped. And tonight, the verdict is in. Guilty. Guilty of being chosen. Guilty of carrying fire. Guilty of disrupting darkness simply by existing. When God says it's your time, even your enemies have to clap. Chosen one, as we come to the close of this divine encounter, I need you to hold on to these eternal truths that heaven has whispered over your life tonight. Remember this: every battle you fought has been preparing you for the victory that's unfolding right now. The warfare wasn't evidence of God's absence, it was proof of your importance in His kingdom plan. You didn't survive by accident, you were preserved by assignment. Remember this: when God says it's your time, no demon in hell can vote against it. The attacks you endured were desperate attempts to stop what heaven had already decreed. But divine decrees don't need human approval or demonic permission. They simply are. And remember this above all: you are not broken, you are not forgotten, you are not disqualified. You are chosen, crowned, and called for such a time as this. You are never alone in this journey. But let me tell you something that might be even more powerful than knowing God is with you, knowing that you're part of a family that understands your journey. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there are thousands of others who have walked similar paths, who have felt the same spiritual weight, who have questioned their calling just like you have. This community isn't built on shallow connections or surface-level encouragement. It's forged in the fire of shared warfare, united by the understanding that comes only from those who have wrestled with heaven and refused to let go without a blessing. When you comment below, when you share your heart, when you ask for prayer, you're not speaking into the void. You're speaking into a sanctuary of souls who will stand with you, pray with you, and believe with you when your own faith feels fragile. A question for your heart. Before we close, I want you to ask yourself this: if God has brought you through everything you've survived up to this point, if He has preserved you through storms that should have destroyed you, if He has kept His hand on your life when you couldn't even feel His presence, what makes you think He would abandon His work in you now, right when you're on the threshold of your greatest breakthrough? A prayer over your life. Let me pray over you right now, as if I could reach through this screen and place my hand on your shoulder, feeling the weight you've carried and speaking life into the weary places of your spirit. Father God, I come before your throne tonight carrying the hearts of your chosen ones, these precious souls who have endured what others couldn't imagine, who have stood when everything told them to fall, who have believed when circumstances screamed lies. Lord, I pray that your peace, the peace that surpasses all understanding, would settle over them right now like a warm blanket on a cold night. Let them feel your presence in a way that dissolves every doubt, every fear, every question mark that has haunted their sleep. God, you see the tears they've cried in secret. You've collected everyone in your bottle. You see the prayers they've whispered when their voice was too broken to speak aloud. You've heard everyone. Tonight, let them know that their midnight cries have become your morning songs of victory. Father, I pray for divine doors to swing open, doors of opportunity, doors of provision, doors of restoration. What they lost in the wilderness, restore in the promised land. What was stolen in the valley, return on the mountaintop. What was broken in the fire, make stronger in the rebuilding. Surround them with people who see their value, who honor their journey, who understand the weight they carry. Remove every voice that brings confusion and amplify every sound that brings clarity. Let them walk in such obvious favor that even their enemies have to acknowledge your hand upon their lives. And Lord, when they're tempted to look back, remind them how far they've come. When they're tempted to give up, remind them what they're carrying. When they're tempted to settle, remind them they were born for more. Cover them tonight with your wings. Let them sleep the sleep of the righteous, knowing that while they rest, you are working. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Join this movement of faith. If this message has spoken to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their struggle has meaning, that their pain has purpose, that their story isn't over, it's just beginning its most beautiful chapter. Leave a comment below and tell us what God is stirring in your heart. Ask for prayer if you need it. Share a testimony if you have one. This isn't just a comment section, it's a prayer wall where heaven meets earth and miracles happen in real time. And please, share this message. You never know who in your circle is fighting a battle in silence, who needs to hear that they're not crazy for feeling called to something greater, who needs to be reminded that their difference is their distinction, not their disqualification. Stay connected to this move of God. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey tonight. Your presence here isn't accidental, it's appointment by divine design. If this word has fed your spirit, if it has reminded you of who you are and whose you are, then make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because what God is releasing in this season is too powerful to miss. These aren't just videos, they're lifelines for those who feel lost in the wilderness, compasses for those who've lost their direction, and battle cries for those who've forgotten their warriors. Your journey doesn't end here. Your breakthrough doesn't stop here. Your story doesn't conclude here. This is where your victory begins. Rest well tonight, chosen one. Tomorrow, you rise not as who you were, but as who you've always been destined to become. And remember, you are deeply loved, divinely chosen, and absolutely unstoppable. Until we meet again in this sacred space, may the peace of God guard your heart, and the power of God guide your steps. You are not alone. You never have been. You never will be. Now go and walk in the authority heaven has given you.